The surgical floor of Denver General went dead silent when Dr. Marcus Blackwood's body hit the polished linoleum with a sickening thud. His expensive Italian shoes scraped uselessly against the floor as he clawed at his throat, gasping for air through his crushed windpipe. Above him stood Riley Chen, the 5'2" night nurse everyone called Whisper because she barely spoke above a murmur. But she wasn't whispering now. Her voice cut through the shocked silence like a blade. "Touch me again, and next time you won't get back up." 20 minutes later, when the Blackhawks landed on the hospital roof, the extraction team didn't ask for the chief surgeon. They asked for one person. "Where is Ghost Rider?" Hey everyone, drop your location in the comments below and smash that subscribe button. You won't believe how this story ends. Riley Chen had perfected the art of invisibility over 18 months at Denver General Hospital. At barely 5 feet tall and weighing maybe 110 pounds soaking wet, she moved through the cardiac surgery ward like a shadow, always apologizing, always making herself smaller. The other nurses had nicknamed her Whisper because her voice was so soft that doctors routinely asked her to repeat herself. She took the nickname without complaint, just like she took everything else. The endless criticism, the eye rolls, the casual cruelty that seemed to follow her through every shift. The transformation had been deliberate and painstaking. Staff Sergeant Riley Chen, United States Marine Corps Force Reconnaissance, had died officially in a classified operation in Syria 3 years ago. In her place rose this carefully constructed civilian persona. Timid, apologetic, forgettable. She had studied other nurses for months during her rehabilitation, watched how they moved, how they spoke, how they carried themselves. She had learned to flinch at loud noises, to tremble when criticized, to make her voice crack with nerves when speaking to authority figures. Every morning when she woke up in her sparse studio apartment, Riley performed the same ritual. She would stand in front of the bathroom mirror and practice being weak. Shoulders hunched forward to hide the lean muscle beneath her scrubs. Eyes downcast to avoid the predatory stare that had once made enemy combatants confess their secrets. Voice pitched higher and softer to disguise the command authority that had once directed helicopter extractions under enemy fire. What none of them knew was that Riley Chen had once been one of only 12 women ever to complete the elite Force Recon training program. She had spent 4 years moving through enemy territory in complete silence, gathering intelligence behind enemy lines where discovery meant death. The trembling hands they mocked? Battle damage from an IED blast in Syria that had killed 3 of her teammates and left her with nerve damage that made precision movements a constant struggle. The soft voice they ridiculed? Vocal cord scarring from the same explosion that had earned her a Purple Heart, a Navy Cross, and a medical discharge that was really a cover identity. But the tremor in her hands was also something else. A reminder of the 17 people she had killed in 4 years of active service. 17 confirmed kills with sniper rifle, combat knife, and her bare hands. The trembling wasn't just nerve damage. It was the physical manifestation of a conscience that wouldn't let her forget what those hands had done in the name of national security. Every morning when she looked in the mirror, Riley saw 2 different women staring back. There was Nurse Chen, with her carefully messy hair and oversized scrubs that hid the lean muscle beneath. And there was Ghost Rider, the woman who had earned her call sign by moving through enemy territory like a spirit, leaving no trace except the bodies of those who threatened American lives. "Chen, move your ass!" Dr. Marcus Blackwood's voice boomed across the surgical prep area, causing several nurses to flinch. Blackwood was everything Riley despised about civilian authority: arrogant, entitled, and completely convinced of his own superiority. At 6'3" and 220 pounds, he used his physical presence like a weapon, towering over the nursing staff to remind them who was in charge. His perfectly styled silver hair and expensive suits marked him as old-money Boston elite. the kind of man who had never been told no in his entire privileged life. Riley had been researching him during her off hours, a habit left over from her intelligence days. Marcus Blackwood III, Harvard Medical School, residency at Massachusetts General, family money dating back to the railroad boom. Married to pharmaceutical heiress Victoria Sterling Blackwood. No children, multiple affairs documented by private investigators. Currently facing a divorce that would cost him half his assets and potentially his medical license if certain allegations proved true. Riley looked up from the IV bag she was preparing, her dark eyes downcast as always. She had been organizing medical supplies with the same precision she'd once used to field strip an M4 carbine. But she forced her hands to fumble slightly, dropping a syringe to maintain her cover. "Yes, doctor. How can I help you?" "How can you help me?" Blackwood repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He gestured to the medication cart she had been restocking, his movements aggressive and territorial. "You can help me by doing your job properly for once. That medication cart you restocked this morning? Half the dosages are wrong. Do you understand that your incompetence could kill someone?" Riley's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She had checked that medication cart 3 times, following protocols she had memorized down to the milligram. Every dosage had been perfect, logged and double-checked according to military precision standards that civilian hospitals couldn't even imagine. The accusation wasn't just unfair, it was dangerous. But she said nothing, just nodded and accepted the blame like she always did. "I'm sorry, doctor. I'll fix it immediately." "Sorry doesn't save lives, Chen," Blackwood continued, warming to his favorite theme. He gestured to the other nurses who had gathered to watch the daily humiliation. Jessica Wu from pediatrics, Maria Santos from the ICU, and David Kim, one of the charge nurses who had always been kind to Riley but never defended her when it mattered. "This is exactly what's wrong with modern healthcare. We're hiring these timid little mice who fold the moment there's any pressure." Riley felt the familiar burn of shame in her cheeks, but underneath it, something else was stirring. Something she had spent 18 months suppressing, burying under layers of deliberate meekness and manufactured fragility. It was the part of her that had earned the call sign Ghost Rider, for her ability to slip behind enemy lines and eliminate targets without making a sound. She pushed the feeling down, like she always did. She was Riley Chen now, not Staff Sergeant Chen. She was a civilian nurse trying to heal people instead of hurt them, trying to build a life where her skills were used to save lives instead of take them. "I understand, doctor," she said quietly, letting a slight tremor creep into her voice. "It won't happen again." "It better not," Blackwood said, then paused as his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression darkened further. "Perfect. My wife's lawyers want to meet tonight, as if this day couldn't get any worse." Riley knew about the divorce proceedings. Hospital gossip traveled fast, and everyone was aware that Dr. Blackwood's marriage to pharmaceutical heiress Victoria Sterling Blackwood was falling apart in spectacular fashion. The rumor was that she'd caught him with not 1, but 3 different surgical residents over the past year. "Doctor," Riley said carefully, letting concern show in her voice while keeping her posture submissive. "Maybe you should take the evening off. You seem—" "I seem what?" Blackwood stepped closer, invading her personal space in the way that bullies do when they sense weakness. Riley's combat instincts immediately cataloged threat indicators. Elevated heart rate visible in his neck pulse, dilated pupils suggesting intoxication or extreme stress, aggressive posturing designed to intimidate. "Are you questioning my fitness for duty, Chen? Are you, a night shift nurse with no medical degree, telling me how to manage my schedule?" Riley could smell the alcohol on his breath now. Whiskey, expensive stuff, probably from the bottle she'd heard he kept in his office safe. He wasn't just stressed about his divorce. He was drunk. In a cardiac surgery unit where lives hung in the balance, the chief surgeon was making medical decisions while intoxicated. The realization hit her like a physical blow. This wasn't just workplace bullying anymore. This was a direct threat to patient safety, the kind of situation where her silence could literally get people killed. She should report him. She knew she should. But reporting Dr. Blackwood would mean standing up to him, making herself visible, drawing the kind of attention she had spent 18 months avoiding. "No, doctor," she said instead, hating herself for the cowardice even as the words left her mouth. "I'm sorry. I spoke out of turn." Blackwood smiled, a predatory expression that made Riley's skin crawl. "That's better. You know, Chen, I've been thinking about your performance lately. Maybe it's time we had a formal review, brought in some outside evaluators to assess your clinical competency." The threat was clear. A formal competency review would require documentation, background checks, references from previous employers. Riley's fabricated work history would crumble under that kind of scrutiny. "Now clean up this medication cart and try not to make any more mistakes," Blackwood continued, enjoying his moment of power. "And Chen?" He leaned down until his face was inches from hers, close enough that she could see the burst capillaries in his nose from years of heavy drinking. "Next time you think about questioning my authority, remember that I can have you fired with one phone call." He walked away, leaving Riley standing beside the medication cart with her hands shaking. Not from fear, but from the effort of keeping her training suppressed. Every instinct she possessed was screaming at her to eliminate the threat. The afternoon dragged on with agonizing slowness. Riley threw herself into her work, using the familiar rhythms of patient care to calm her racing thoughts. She checked and rechecked medications, monitored vital signs with military precision, and found herself unconsciously cataloging the tactical layout of the cardiac unit. At 4:30 p.m., she was restocking supplies in the cardiac catheterization lab when she heard voices coming from room 314. Through the door, she could see Dr. Blackwood cornering Sarah Martinez, one of the surgical residents. Sarah was pressed against the wall, clearly terrified, while Blackwood loomed over her with predatory intent. "Come on, Sarah," Blackwood was saying, his words slurred but his intent unmistakable. "You know you want to. Everyone knows you're looking for someone to mentor you. I could make your career, or I could destroy it. Your choice." Sarah's eyes found Riley's across the hallway, pleading for help. She was 26 years old, fresh out of medical school, with student loans that would cripple her financially if she lost this residency position. Riley felt something snap inside her chest. It was like a dam breaking, releasing years of suppressed anger and frustration. She had joined the military to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. She had spent 4 years putting her life on the line for the principle that the strong should defend the weak. "Dr. Blackwood," she said, her voice still soft, but carrying a new undertone that made both Sarah and Blackwood turn toward her. "You need to step away from Dr. Martinez." Blackwood's face flushed with rage and alcohol. "Are you kidding me? Are you actually interfering with my business, Chen?" "Your business is cardiac surgery," Riley replied, taking a step closer. "This isn't that." Blackwood released Sarah and turned his full attention to Riley. She could see the calculation in his eyes. He was drunk and angry, but he was also smart enough to recognize that Riley represented a different kind of threat than the young resident. "You know what, Chen?" Blackwood said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I've had enough of your holier-than-thou attitude. You want to play the hero? Let's see how heroic you feel when you're unemployed." He lunged forward faster than Riley expected, his hands going for her throat. It was a mistake that revealed just how little he understood about the woman he'd been tormenting for 18 months. Riley's training kicked in before her conscious mind could stop it. As Blackwood's hands closed around her neck, she stepped into his guard instead of pulling away, trapping his arms against her body while simultaneously driving her knee upward into his solar plexus. The impact folded him in half, forcing all the air from his lungs in a whistling gasp. But she wasn't done. As Blackwood doubled over, Riley grabbed his wrist and spun him around, applying a joint lock that had been drilled into her muscle memory during countless hours of hand-to-hand combat training. The leverage was perfect. She was using his own weight and momentum against him. "Let go of me!" Blackwood gasped, trying to struggle free. "You're fired! Security!" Riley increased the pressure on the lock, and Blackwood's struggles ceased immediately. "Security is busy," she said calmly, "and you're drunk, which makes you a danger to every patient in this unit." She guided him backward until he was pressed against the wall, his arm twisted behind his back at an angle that was just short of causing permanent damage. Her free hand found the pressure point at the base of his skull, fingers positioning themselves with surgical precision. "Here's what's going to happen," Riley said, her voice still soft, but carrying an authority that made Sarah's eyes widen in recognition. "You're going to resign from your position, effective immediately. You're going to enter treatment for alcoholism, and you're never going to touch another person without their consent, ever again." "You're insane," Blackwood wheezed. "I'll have you arrested for assault. I'll destroy your career." Riley applied pressure to the nerve cluster, and Blackwood's words cut off in a strangled yelp. "You'll do exactly what I tell you to do," she said. "Because if you don't, I'll make sure everyone in this hospital knows exactly what kind of man you really are." She released the pressure slightly, allowing him to speak. "You have no proof of anything." Riley smiled, and Sarah shivered at the expression. It was cold, calculating, and completely without mercy. "I don't need proof. I just need to make enough noise that people start looking closely at your behavior." For a long moment, the only sound in the hallway was Blackwood's labored breathing and the distant hum of medical equipment. Then, from somewhere far above them, came a sound that made Riley's blood turn to ice. Thump. 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 The rhythmic beating of helicopter rotors, multiple aircraft, flying in close formation. Military transport birds, not medical helicopters. The sound was unmistakable to anyone who had spent time in combat zones, and it was getting closer. Riley released Blackwood and stepped back, her mind racing. There was only one reason military helicopters would be landing at a civilian hospital in formation like that. Someone was coming for her. "What is that?" Sarah asked, moving to the window that looked out over the hospital's main entrance. Riley already knew what she would see, but she looked anyway. 3 Black Hawk helicopters were settling onto the hospital's front plaza, their rotors creating a small hurricane of debris and chaos. Tactical teams were already spilling out of the aircraft. "Oh my God," Sarah breathed. "Is that the military?" Riley was already moving, her civilian persona falling away like a discarded costume. Every instinct she possessed was screaming at her to run, to disappear into the hospital's maze of corridors before the extraction team could locate her. But as she reached the stairwell door, she heard Dr. Blackwood's voice behind her. "Security! She assaulted me! Stop her!" Riley paused, her hand on the door handle. Running would confirm every suspicion, but staying meant facing whatever the military wanted from her. The decision was made for her when the stairwell door burst open from below. 2 soldiers in full tactical gear emerged, weapons lowered but ready, their faces hidden behind ballistic masks. "Riley Chen?" the lead soldier asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Riley straightened, muscle memory bringing her to attention despite 3 years of civilian life. "Yes?" "Ma'am, we need you to come with us," Orders from MARSOC Command. Marine Special Operations Command. Riley's heart sank. MARSOC didn't send extraction teams for social calls. If they were here, it meant something had gone catastrophically wrong somewhere in the world, and they needed Ghost Rider to fix it. "I'm retired," Riley said, though even as the words left her mouth, she knew how hollow they sounded. "Ma'am, with respect, retirement is a luxury we can't afford right now. Colonel Mitchell is waiting on the aircraft. He'll brief you on the situation." Colonel Mitchell, Riley's former commanding officer, the man who had recommended her for force recon training and later signed the papers that had given her a new identity after Syria. If Mitchell was here personally, the situation was worse than catastrophic. Behind her, Dr. Blackwood had finally found his voice. "What is this? Who are these people? This woman assaulted me." The lead soldier turned his attention to Blackwood for the first time, and his expression was not friendly. "Sir, you need to step back and remain quiet while we conduct our business." "Your business?" Blackwood sputtered. "This is a hospital. You can't just storm in here with weapons and—" The soldier took a single step forward, and his presence seemed to fill the entire hallway. Dr. Blackwood, who had spent his entire career using his size to intimidate others, suddenly looked very small and very scared. "Sir," the soldier repeated, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came from years of combat experience. "Step back." Blackwood stepped back. Riley looked around the hallway, taking in the scene that had become her life for the past 18 months. The sterile white walls, the smell of antiseptic and fear. The faces of her colleagues staring at her with a mixture of confusion and dawning recognition. "How long?" Riley asked the soldier. "How long what, ma'am?" "How long have you known where I was?" The soldier's expression softened slightly. "Since about 6 months after you disappeared. But orders were to leave you alone unless the situation became critical." "And now it has?" "Ma'am, I think that's a conversation for Colonel Mitchell to have with you." Riley nodded, then turned back to Sarah. "Are you okay?" Sarah nodded mutely, her eyes wide with shock and confusion. Riley looked at Dr. Blackwood, who was still leaning against the wall, nursing his bruised throat and wounded pride. "Remember what I said," she told him. "All of it." Then she turned back to the soldier. "Lead the way." They moved through the hospital corridors like a small military convoy, drawing stares and frightened whispers from patients and staff. Riley found herself falling back into military bearing without conscious thought, shoulders squared, spine straight, eyes forward. They emerged into the main lobby, where the rest of the extraction team had established a perimeter. The hospital's security guards were standing well back, their hands visible and their expressions carefully neutral. Outside, the Blackhawks waited on the plaza, their rotors turning lazily in the evening air. Riley could see Colonel Mitchell standing beside the lead aircraft, his uniform crisp despite the chaos around him. He looked older than she remembered, with more gray in his hair and deeper lines around his eyes. As they approached the aircraft, Mitchell turned to face her. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the weight of shared history and unfinished business hanging between them like smoke. "Ghost Rider," Mitchell said finally, his voice carrying across the distance. "Colonel," Riley replied, falling back into the formal address without thinking. "It's good to see you, Sergeant. Though I wish it were under better circumstances." Riley glanced around at the tactical teams, the helicopters, the chaos that her carefully ordered civilian life had become in the space of 20 minutes. "How bad is it?" Mitchell's expression grew grim. "Bad enough that we need our best back in the field. There's a situation developing in the South China Sea. Joint operation with multiple branches. The kind of thing where having someone with your particular skill set could save a lot of American lives. And if I refuse? Mitchell studied her face, reading the exhaustion and conflict there. Then you refuse, and we find another way. But Riley, he used her first name deliberately, dropping the military formality. People are going to die if we can't pull this off. Good people. Marines, sailors, soldiers. Riley closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders like a familiar burden. She had left the military to escape exactly this kind of moment. The impossible choice between personal peace and duty to others. But the truth was, she had never really escaped. She had just been hiding from it. She thought about Sarah Martinez, about all the vulnerable people who had suffered under Dr. Blackwood's authority. She thought about all the small battles she had lost by staying silent, all the moments when she had chosen invisibility over action. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. When she opened her eyes, Colonel Mitchell was waiting patiently for her answer. "What's the timeline?" she asked. "Wheels up in 10 minutes. Full briefing en route to the staging area." Riley looked back at the hospital, where she could see faces pressed against windows, watching the drama unfold. Somewhere in there, Dr. Blackwood was probably spinning a story about being attacked by a deranged nurse, trying to salvage his reputation. Let them wonder, Riley thought. Let them try to piece together fragments of a story they couldn't possibly understand. By tomorrow morning, Riley Chen, the quiet nurse, would be just another mystery for the hospital gossip mill to churn over. "Ghostwriter?" Mitchell asked gently. Riley Chen, also known as Staff Sergeant Chen, also known as Ghostwriter, took one last look at the civilian life she was leaving behind, then walked toward the waiting helicopter. "Let's go save some Marines," she said. The rotors spun up to full power, drowning out any response from the crowd of onlookers. As the Black Hawk lifted off, Riley pressed her face to the window and watched Denver General shrink below them, its lights fading into the larger tapestry of the city. She was going back to war, but this time, she understood something she hadn't 3 years ago. The war never really ended for people like her. It just found new places to hide, new ways to call her back to service. And maybe that was okay. Maybe some people were meant to be warriors, no matter how hard they tried to be anything else. The helicopter banked east toward whatever crisis waited in the South China Sea, carrying its cargo of elite soldiers toward an uncertain fate. In the cabin, Riley Chen opened her old kit bag and began checking her equipment, her hands steady and sure for the first time in 18 months. Dr. Blackwood had been wrong about one thing. Some people were absolutely built for this work. The question was whether they could survive it long enough to make a difference. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, she was going back to do what she did best: slip behind enemy lines and protect the people who couldn't protect themselves. The mouse had always been a predator. She'd just been wearing a very convincing disguise.